Why do we judge others when we don't want to and we know we shouldn't? In this video, I'm going to dive into the psychology of why humans have a tendency to cast judgment and some very practical tips for rising above that tendency. We'll also look at the deeper or metaphysical side of judgment and how you may be able to enhance your journey to rising above it and evolving yourself consciously. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, the structure of these videos is to start with the psychology of the topic and then later dive into some deeper metaphysical or spiritual explorations around the topic of judgment. So let's start with the psychology. Why do we jump to judging so readily? So one answer to that question is that the human mind is a prolific problem solver. That it simply loves to identify problems and solve them. So when we witness someone that either is causing us problems by the way that they are behaving, thinking or feeling, or maybe even just causing themselves problems or others problems in the way that they are conducting themselves, the human mind loves to come in with an option to solve the problem. And that can often come in the form of a judgment, such as that person shouldn't be doing this, they should be doing it this way, why are they doing it that way, why are they doing this to me, they shouldn't be behaving or thinking in this particular fashion. So the problem-solving mind, being very embedded in our everyday human lives, defaults naturally to that process. And so it can be very tricky to catch ourselves in that process and step back. Another answer to why we judge so frequently comes in the process of projection. For those of you that haven't come across the concept of projection before, projection is a defense mechanism where we unconsciously take our thoughts, feelings, our traits, and we place them on another human being. We put them on someone else. We fail to see what is inside of us and start to see it in someone else. There's a famous quote by Carl Jung that states that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to understanding ourselves. And so this process of blaming others, seeing fault in others, is actually a reflective mirror to look back on oneself. Kind of like a movie projector that is taking everything internally and just applying it to what we see out in the world in others. And I've got a good example of this. Early in my career, I worked with a lady who felt that it was very necessary to talk about her successes with clients. So she would regularly come to meetings and felt this incessant need, in my opinion anyway, to speak very glowingly of herself for how she'd helped some of her clients in a mental health setting. And I found myself getting very irritated by this behavior, and it really bothered me quite a lot. And I just assumed, well, she's behaving in a way that is unnecessary, and I'm justified in having some kind of judgment. Although when I looked at it deeper and I understood that I was projecting, I realized that I had had that same pattern earlier in my life, that when I was younger, I liked to boast about my successes, particularly playing sport. And while I'd changed this pattern, there was still an aspect of me that obviously could tend towards doing that. And I had potentially denied that aspect of myself. Well, I know I denied that aspect of myself. Just because it wasn't active anymore, it didn't mean that it wasn't still an aspect of me, a part of me that I just pushed away. And so I soon realized that that part of me needed attention, and it wasn't about her at all. It was about me. So what can we do about judgment, criticism of others? If we start simply with applying conscious strategies, it all starts with mindfulness. If we're simply going to explore it from a conscious point of view, it can be very difficult to catch all our judgy or critical thoughts. But if we are a bit clued into our patterns, then we may be able to have some success in not allowing those critical or judgmental ways becoming too predominant. And one sort of pattern to look out for are the sorts of mental phrases that we might have running. So the sort of self-talk that could give us a clue that we're falling into judgment or criticism, such as phrases like, why would they do this, or what a fool, or how stupid. If there are these go-to phrases that you find yourself defaulting to quite frequently, then of course being on the lookout for those sorts of internal phrasing. It's not necessarily something you'll say out loud, but internally in your thoughts, then of course you can be more vigilant for those sorts of thought patterns showing up and hopefully cut them off at the pass. Similarly, we can also look for emotions or sensations and body language that could give us a clue that we're going into a judgmental space. So, for example, if we start to realize that when we're judging someone, we peer our eyes or shake our head, draw our mouth back, that these clues, when we catch ourselves engaging in these behaviors or body language, might be sensations in the body where we start to feel ourselves getting a bit warmer in the face or tight in the head. Again, that can help us be mindful, catch ourselves in the pattern, and cut it off at the pass. As far as catching these thought patterns goes, there's a couple of great strategies that I've used in the past with clients around stepping back from your thoughts, a process known in some areas of psychology as diffusion. Diffusion meaning to separate from your thoughts, to be the observer of your thoughts. And so one of those techniques is called naming the story, coming up with a label for the judgmental thought pattern and labeling it as a story that your mind tells you from time to time, such as the they shouldn't story, or why would they story, or how dare they story. It doesn't really matter too much what the label is that you give it, as long as it resonates for you and will help you to catch yourself in the process of diving into that thought pattern. So for example, it might look like, oh, I'm doing the how dare they story again. It's just got me again. And you catch yourself, have a moment of realization and disengage from that story. And alongside that technique is another one that I've found useful at times, which is referred to as thanking your mind. So thanking your mind is, I guess, a playful way of catching the thoughts and acknowledging them by saying, okay, thank you, mind, for that thought. Maybe a little bit sarcastic for some people. You could call it playful, you could call it sarcastic. But again, another way just to help you separate and observe the thought as not being particularly helpful in a given moment that you're having it. Now, at a subconscious level, we can also work at it from the perspective of our parts. My other videos have referred to this process of working with parts. The model that I use a lot is the internal family systems model, whereby we can identify that there are certain parts of us that are falling into, well, in this case, a pattern of being judgmental, but that's for a reason, that there's some deeper reason why this part is defaulting or falling into that tendency to judge or to criticize. So, for example, if it was just simply a part that's just critical across the board, that part, when we explore it or looked into ourselves a bit deeper, we may find that it's there trying to improve things. So improve the other person's life, improve our life. That is why it is seeking to be critical. Another part that may use criticism or judgment as a way of operating could be a part that is being blunt, and direct, and maybe coming across as harsh, but maybe that part is doing so because it doesn't want us to come across as weak or vulnerable to another human being. Hence it comes across as being judgy. There could also be a part of us that defaults to being selfish in its way of operating, and again using judgment as part of that selfish pattern. If we were to dive deeper, we may find that that selfish part is only doing that because it's fearful that we'll be taken advantage of if we're not looking after ourselves. Or a part that uses denial and doesn't look at ourselves and looks at everyone else as being the problem, judging them, because that part is fearful that we will be shown up to be not good enough if we actually look back at ourselves. And on the flip side, if we look at a part that's maybe completely self-critical, very harsh on ourselves only, not so much on others, but critical of ourselves, the reason a part could be doing that would be because it feels it would be unsafe to really look at others in criticism or judgment for fear of them leaving, abandoning us, having no one around us for support. So they're just a few examples that highlight how parts of our psyche, of our personality, are formed for good reasons to protect us, to help us, and that they may use judgment or criticism as a tool, but not maliciously, just as a way of protection. And when we can learn to go internally, honor these parts, not see them as our enemies, and form a connection with them, we can coach them and support them in dialing back the intensity of their judgment or criticism. And I also wanted to point out at this point that being non-judgmental, so let's say we get quite good at not indulging judgmental tendencies, we can also go too far the other way. Because non-judgment doesn't mean that you can't give someone compassionate feedback. So if you know that someone you care about is receptive to you and respects you, and you can see that they're perhaps going down a path that's not ideal, it's not necessarily judgment or criticism if you use assertive language with them and reflect back to them something that you're noticing. Something like, from my perspective, I see X, Y, and Z. That is not judgment. That is reflection. You're not trying to force the person to change. You're just offering them something that you've observed, something that you've noticed. And as the saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. So offering that perspective, offering that gift of how you see it is up to them. But as I said, when it's done appropriately, it is not being judgmental. Now I'd like to look at the process or the pattern of judgment in human beings from a deeper or metaphysical perspective. And the first thing I'd like to highlight in that area is that judgment or criticism can arise from us forgetting that we're all connected, from buying into the illusion that we are somehow separate, that we're not all connected in this one unified field of consciousness. It's a little bit like taking separate branches on a tree. One branch over one side, looking at the branch over the other side and casting judgments towards that branch because it doesn't like what it's doing. But when you trace that branch back, it links onto the same trunk. The same trunk is connected to the same root system, and the livelihood of that tree is all interconnected. And so this is the first step in really rising above our judgmental patterns in this deeper, I guess, metaphysical way, which is to see the illusion first, see that we've bought into the illusion of separation and that we're not. And if you refer to one of my previous videos on forgiveness, I refer there to the process of advanced forgiveness touched on in books like Disappearance of the Universe and the fairly well-known text, A Course in Miracles, and what it's teaching about this advanced or radical type of forgiveness. And it's advanced or radical because it's not the way that I guess a lot of humans use the word forgiveness. It's starting with this concept that I've just touched on, this idea that we're not separate. It starts with seeing that this other human being that may be doing something that isn't to your preference is an extension of you. It is still an aspect of the one consciousness, even though that might be very hard to process from a physical or three-dimensional point of view. And so if you judge them, you're actually judging yourself. And so what you're actually doing in a process of advanced forgiveness, as taught in A Course in Miracles, is that you're not really forgiving that they did anything wrong. You're forgiving that you bought into the illusion of separation and realizing and having this moment of, oh, oops, I saw them as separate, or I saw them as wrong in a way that was never the case. The fact is, the other person is perfectly innocent, just like you, and they may be at a point in their journey where they've completely disconnected themselves from love or lost their way, and that may be coming out in behaviours or very toxic patterns. But underneath all of that, they are part of the one unified consciousness, and if they're lost, they just need understanding and finding their way back. Now, you might not be able to play any role in them finding their way back, but if you can see that underneath all of that behavior, that darkness that they might be projecting out into the world, there's an innocent light still shining, maybe not easy to witness. And I know that might be very hard to fathom for some people out there in the world, or some big things happening on the world stage that would seem to warrant judgment. But I can guarantee you that the judgment serves you absolutely no purpose. It's no benefit whatsoever. Realizing that someone's behaving in a way that does not align with your values, sure, that can be a reminder for who you are and who you wish to be. But judging them does nothing. If you think about it a little bit like, well, on this graph, I'm trying to highlight that life is this potentially uphill, progressive journey that as we evolve, we progress upwards, move towards higher vibrations. And okay, maybe we see ourselves as having made some progress up that line, up this hill, and that this other human back here needs to be woken up in some kind of way to progress upwards. But we can't. We can't do anything to jolt them. Certainly criticizing and judging them won't do that. They may follow you through your loving example and be inspired and feel your energy and make some progress or have their own epiphany or awakening, but you can't force them. And that can be part of where this judgment can come in, that we really wish for someone to wake up and see what they could be, or see how they are being, but we can't. It's up to them. Now, this doesn't mean that you condone what another person is doing. When they're behaving in a way that you perceive to be unethical or unkind. It's not about agreeing with it. It's just realizing that that judgment does absolutely nothing for you and nothing for them. And it's these moments of judgment that are really simply a reflective mirror. That's what they are. On a deeper level, they are always an opportunity to look at those shadow aspects of oneself, to see that one of these parts of you that is not operating from love, that is operating out of fear, is in play. And that it's simply an opportunity to tune into that part of yourself and bring guidance and support to that part. These moments of judgment are a chance for you to realize that you bought into the illusion of separation and to choose unity consciousness again. These moments are a simple opportunity to find your way back to love. As Mother Teresa famously said, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. So choose who you really are. Choose to be love.